Okay. And now you will have me for a few minutes. Before I start the presentation, I think it's very good to tell you where I'm coming from. And where I'm coming from is working for around 10 years at the Center for Entrepreneurship at the university, seeing hundreds of business plans coming in and out, but very, very few coming into fruition. And there's many reasons for that. But I believe a very core and fundamental reason is the systematic lack of early seed funding and access to early stage finance. So as we try to tackle this problem, we found out that crowdfunding might be an idea, and ever since and until today, this has become my second full-time job. But I'll share with you what we discovered, what we know, and hopefully you will find it both interesting and stimulating, and again, questions are widely welcome. Just to make sure that we are all on the same page when we talk about crowdfunding, I'd like to clarify that what we mean is that we fund the project by raising small sums from many people. This is the great concept behind it. And it replaces the mentality where we went into one major investor, one or very few major supporters, and asked for their help, and if the answer was no, then nothing happened. Today, we can go to the crowd and collect a lot of resources from multiple people. This is good for a number of reasons. First of all, it's good because you get the money that you need, and we'll talk about success rates and where they stand today. But you also get the extremely valuable experience of testing your concept with the market. You get real, live feedback and questions and comments that are very critical for you in fine-tuning your concept and challenging your beliefs about your little baby, that idea. So this is very helpful. But it also means you have market validation in case you are successful. So if you have a successful campaign, going to the angel investor or going to an investor later and telling them, we had a successful campaign and we have 100, 200, 500, 1,000 backers behind us, is a much different point for negotiation than coming with a business plan and saying, I have an idea. And finally, it also helps you to recruit your initial set of customers. It's very difficult to start sales, actually selling the product. But here, through this goodwill that exists in the community, people are willing to adopt and buy or pre-buy your product even before it is produced, even before it's ordered. And that helps you, and especially all of us know about challenges in terms of cash flow. So this means more democracy. More people can get funded, more entrepreneurs can get their startup going, and it also means that investors have more options to invest in. Venture capital works like an archipelago, little closed islands that are somehow concentrated around each other, but each one is an independent island, and each one maintains their information in a very closed set. But here, you have, in a way, what we would dream about, almost perfect information publicly available. And you see how the market reacts to it. And you see who jumps on that wagon in real time. So, again, more democracy on all fronts. But in Norway, we live in the, I will call it tragic situation of lack of access to early seed funding. With the exception of Innovation Norway, that is doing a great job, and probably one of the main lifebloods of early stage financing, we must acknowledge Innovation Norway is a government body and has government agendas and chooses projects based on government agendas that have a public good intent, but not necessarily the best economic concept. And when we look into the figures, this is just a recent figure that I've seen, that in 2015, there has been 1.8 billion raised in the Nordic region, and in Norway, 30 deals raised only $85 million. That's peanuts. You say, $85 million, it's nothing when you compare it globally. And especially when you compare it regionally, because Iceland with 7% of our population and the most rigid financial environment today in terms of regulation, has managed to raise twice as much. So something is wrong in Norway, in access and in support of early stage entrepreneurs. So hopefully crowdfunding can help solve that. But I talk a lot about early stage funding, but the truth is crowdfunding can happen all throughout the financial life cycle of companies. And we've seen companies raise funding at the early stage idea, and we've seen them raise funding before they went public. An investor can probably share some of these experiences. So it exists throughout the life cycle. But I believe that its real value is really at the early stage, because this is where today a huge market gaps. Banks won't give loans because it's extremely high risk. Our investors only invest in real estate and until recently oil and gas. They don't invest in high risk. And we are not very friendly to bring international investors. So who is supposed to build the pyramid? We're trying to build the pyramid without a base. We only support the top. Only the well-succeeding, well-doing companies. Well, a pyramid without a base won't be a pyramid. So crowdfunding, the solution. There's 4 types of crowdfunding. Equity crowdfunding means that for the money that you give, you get an ownership stake in the company, and you set the rules, you set the conditions, and people can either opt yes or no to these rules. And again, that's an advantage versus normal negotiations with angel investors and venture capital. You also have non-equity, but related concept, which is revenue sharing. So you don't have an ownership stake in the company, but you can promise a revenue stream based on actual sales, should it succeed. You have lending-based, so that for the money that you give, you get the principal back with some interest that has been negotiated online. And this comes in 2 forms, peer-to-peer consumer lending and peer-to-peer business lending. Our main focus is on business lending because we want to see support for entrepreneurs. Reward means that for the money that you give, you get products, pre-sold, or all sorts of tokens of gratitude and appreciation. And in donation, it's basically classic donation. You don't get anything tangible, but beyond increasing the welfare and promoting that good cause that you are very passionate about. So volumes. In 2014, we're talking about $16 billion globally, $9 billion in the US, 3.2 in Europe, most of it in the UK. The projections for 2015 is that this has already grown to $34 billion, which means that the first time in history, crowdfunding is surpassing global volumes of venture capital. And the World Bank is saying this will grow up to 93 billion by 2025, but I think it's a pessimistic projection, because this was for a few years ago, this projection that was made. All in all, there's around 1,500 platforms operating globally today, and we see that the majority of the activity, at least today, is going towards lending. So out of these $16 billion, 11 is associated with lending crowdfunding. Where is the money going to? 6.7 billion goes to entrepreneurship, 3 billion goes to social causes, around 3 billion to art, performing arts, book, music productions, and another billion goes to real estate, and the rest to all sorts of eclectic bunch of projects. In the Nordic region, in the last 3 years, we see volumes of around 254 million euros between 2012 and 2014. Of course, the majority of which is in the lending sphere, but we believe the greatest growth and the greatest potential today is coming from equity, and there we see a growth rate of 1,400%. As regulations are relaxed, as regulations are reinterpreted, as authorities are re-looking into the opportunities of this option, we see equity growing very, very fast. In the Nordic region, 25 million euros have been raised by Nordic local platforms, and another 15 million euros through campaigns on global platforms like Indiegogo, Kickstarter, and other household names you might have heard about. And when excluding lending, that is a particularly problematic form, we say that all other forms of crowdfunding today in the Nordics constitute around 6% of the European market. These are the platforms that operate today in the Nordic region. I've recently learned there are two other new ones, one in lending in Finland and one lending in Sweden that has joined this group, and some have been lost throughout the process. But we have an alliance, and that includes 5 platforms from Iceland, Denmark, Norway, and Finland, and hopefully from Sweden as well in the future. Most of them are reward-based platforms, but we have Investor that has really been a path breaker in Europe in terms of equity and bonds. Let's put it this way. Investor is also the first platform in Europe to have a MiFID license that gives it access to all 31 EEA countries. So it's also able to do cross-border crowdfunding, and it is really the first of its kind. And they've been doing very well. I'll show some figures later. So what's the biggest problem today? The biggest problem today is regulation. Laws that have been written in the age of the carriage and the horse that are trying to be applied to the reality of the internet. And it's just irrelevant regulations. And the problem is that many governments are doing nothing about it. We see some governments leading the way. The UK is definitely the best example that have really reinterpreted and reworked the regulatory framework, and this is why we see these huge volumes there. In the Nordics, Denmark has taken this role, and there's been a special report and a special committee that have really looked into it, and today both lending and equity crowdfunding are possible in Denmark under new types of licenses that are regulated by the national financial authorities. At our alliance level, we're responsible for around 30 million euros raised through campaigns, 10 million in equity, all of it is Investor, and 3 million in the other reward-based platforms in Iceland, Denmark, Norway, and Finland. But you can see the volumes are significantly different. When we talk about the average campaign on equity, we talk about 200,000 euros on average. When we talk about the reward campaigns, we talk about 3,300 euros on average. And of course, there's a huge variance here between $200,000 to $1,000 and $500 campaigns. But these are the averages. So in high-cost Norway, probably equity is the most relevant and most promising for entrepreneurs. What we do as an alliance, first of all, events like this, reaching out to the public, trying to educate, trying to tell you what is going on, trying to recruit people to join, because as we mentioned, it's all about the community. If we have a lively community, the community will serve as fund providers, but feedback providers, door openers, investors, channel suppliers, partners. These are all people who have vested interest in the success of the different campaigns, and we see it. We see bar owners investing in equity campaigns of new vodka companies, and we see pharmacies investing in equity campaigns of software for procurement of medicine because they have vested interest, and they earn twice. They're both the distribution channel or the user and the company owner. We're working on developing this community. We have an Alliance website. On the Alliance website, you can see the currently running Nordic campaigns. And Nordic basically means if you registered on one of the platforms, it will run in parallel in all other member platforms. So you have more or greater international exposure. And at the end, it's about knowledge sharing. Sharing with the community, sharing among the platforms, and with the public. So figures. In Denmark so far, we had around 500 successful campaigns. Success rates is 36% overall. And we talk about growth of around 60% from 2014 to 2015. Bidra, 77 campaigns so far, 30% success rates, growth from 2014 to 2015 of 200%. In Carolina, Iceland, which is, yeah.
What do you mean success rate?
Success rate? How many campaigns out of total campaigns are successful? Okay? So if you have 100 campaigns, 30 of them would be successful, meaning they will reach the goal or will raise the funds that they set. Okay? Carolina Fund in Iceland, probably a champion in Iceland. There is 176 campaigns with close to 80% success rates. This is phenomenal. Mecenate in Finland, again, a reward platform, 177 campaigns so far, close to 70% success rates. So think about it as an entrepreneur. Where in the world will you have a chance of 1 to 3 to get the money you need? Nowhere else in the world today. Now, it doesn't mean it's easy. You don't just publish a campaign and money will fall from the sky. You need to work hard, very hard. And Gaute and Christian will tell you just how hard. But if you work hard, you have a 1 to 3 chance of getting the money. No other channel will give you those successes today. Equity, talking about 40% success rates, and again, much larger volumes, as we mentioned earlier. These are the biggest campaigns on each platform as of today. This is constantly changing, but I think the real records have been broken in Finland this year, both on the equity and reward sides. We had 2 million euros for Ahola Transport in equity campaign, and we had a reward campaign of 85,000 euros for the Tampere Gaming Museum. These are the best campaigns from Norway ever. The best campaign ever has been $1.5 million raised on Kickstarter by Red Raid Games from Oslo. The second best, which we are not sure if they are really from Norway because they're jumping between Hong Kong and Canada and the US and Norway, but they affiliate themselves or register in Norway. Linear, which is a fashion company, had run 3 campaigns so far and raised close to $700,000, and the others $200,000, $100,000 for different things. Consumer goods, gaming, and different other projects. But like everything else, I'm really sad to say, but we are the worst in Europe. We really are. We have one of the lowest volumes of crowdfunding today, both in total terms and in per person or per capita terms. And then the great question is, why? Why are we so bad? And my answer is, above everything else, regulation. Because regulation is very outdated, especially when it comes to equity and lending, it means that all activity moves abroad or does not happen. So we have a systematical shooting in the leg built into our legal framework. And it's not to say we are careful. We are the worst in Europe. So it's being too careful, I would say. And after we talk about regulations, there are 3 more issues. First of all, we have a crappy investment culture. We don't invest in high-risk ventures. We have very traditional tastes in terms of investment, real estate, oil and gas, but we don't invest in high-risk ICT companies, not enough. We see $85 million. That's one investment in other countries. We have some cultural problems as well. I think we have the Janteloven in entrepreneurship. You have to stick out. If you want your campaigns to stick out, I'll come back to you. If you want the campaign to succeed, you have to stick out, you have to be aggressive, and we don't like to be very aggressive salespeople. I would also say we have an inherent expectation for the state to pay for everything. The state should take the risk. I pay a lot of taxes, let the state support entrepreneurs. Why is it my problem? I will invest in trusted funds. But it doesn't work this way. If you want to build a country, you need to invest in high risk as well. And another thing I repeatedly come across is this twisted perception that you need to hide good ideas. I promise you, the worst way to sell something is to hide it. You won't be able to bring your product out to market. And if you think anybody is sitting on the internet looking for your idea, you are dreaming. There are billions of ideas published every day. Why do you think anybody is looking for your idea? They only notice you when you're doing very, very well. Then somebody will try to copy. Until then, nobody cares about you. And you need to struggle to get attention. That's the truth. So please don't hide your idea and don't talk to me about property rights and copy. This is old time. The last one is lack of knowledge. We don't educate. The support agencies don't educate entrepreneurs properly about crowdfunding. Educational institutions don't educate properly about crowdfunding. And I would dare say that even media coverage has been very minimal. And when it did, as usual, media likes to thrive on tragedy. So they look into all these bad examples of a failed platform, a failed campaign, someone that has been cheated, and that's the story. But the truth is that despite of billions of volumes of crowdfunding in the UK, millions, in the UK, only 1% is default. That's the truth. Less than 1%, that's the risk. So it's about putting some perspective in what we're exposed to as well. I'll jump on the success factors because you're going to have a whole lecture about that, but I'll just give you snippets. Everything you do seems to influence your success. And here are some fun statistics. If you have a video on your campaign, you have 120% more likely to get the funding versus if you just publish text. If you are a team and not an individual, you have 70% higher likelihood of getting the funding. If you have spelling mistakes in your text, you will pay by a reduction of 13% success rate. So there's a lot of things that you don't think through, and when just publishing a campaign, that are fundamental and critical to your success. I also like these statistics, that women are much better at this. We always hear women are not as strong in entrepreneurship, but I'll tell you, women are the queens of crowdfunding. Why? Because they have social intelligence, emotional intelligence, cultural intelligence, and they are able to communicate with the crowd and also set more realistic expectations to begin with. And with this, I'll finish. What do I see in the future? More niche platforms, and not only this take-it-all type of platforms, more real estate, more energy-focused platforms, journalism-focused platforms, and so on. More equity crowdfunding as regulation is being readjusted across the world. This is where the big money will come from and will really be the lifeline of entrepreneurial support. We see governments changing slowly, but changing regulation, and this will continue as a trend. And of course, there's a continuous need to continue and educate the market about the possibilities. And lastly, as this happens, entrepreneurs and campaigners will become more and more professional, and the competition will be on. Thank you very much. I'll now answer 2 questions and promise to leave the stage. Okay? Thank you. So, there was a question, yeah?
Yeah, a lot of people are taking pictures, so I wonder if you will make the slides.
I can make them available, no problem.
You said lending category was problematic. Why is that?
It's because, again, it's the regulation aspect to it and consumer protection aspect to it. In terms of regulation, today, at least, what is so problematic about lending crowdfunding? And I'd say it's 2 things. One is, in terms of regulation, because the instinctual answers from the authorities would be you need a banking license. To have a banking license, you need, what, 25 million in, to put as collateral or whatever, or to have it as a guarantee. 25 million crowns is a lot of money for the average entrepreneur, or for the new startup platform that is trying to establish itself. This is a major barrier. And the other issue is consumer protection. And here I think regulation is necessary and is much needed, but it needs to be adjusted to this reality. What type of laws do platforms need to follow in order to make it happen securely? So this is my answer to that.
Are there any specific regulations in Norway that, for instance, prohibits Bidra to do certain things which they have had to work around? Could you give some examples?
Yeah, I mean, lending, again, the official position out today is that you need a banking license to do lending crowdfunding, which is a big hassle. The other issue is to do equity crowdfunding. The existing legal framework does not really allow that, but there are some loopholes that can be used. And the best one is to use a licensed platform for a MiFID license platform from elsewhere in Europe that is acknowledged by the Norwegian Financial Authority. Okay, I'll be here. I'll be happy to answer all your questions. Again, thank you.